So, A Complete Unknown is a new film from James Mangold that focuses on Bob Dylan's rise to fame in the 1960s. Now, James Mangold, with his other film, like Walk the Line. Walk the Line was another one of his films, a musical biopic that covered a broad range of Johnny Cash, and I think what sets because there's going to be an easy comparison here if you're comparing that to A Complete Unknown with Bob Dylan, but Mangold actually makes the smart call of focusing on a specific part of Bob Dylan's life in that film, by just focusing on specifically the 1960s and what formed Dylan's initial rise to fame, and also his desire for what he wanted out of his fame. And it does have like that. Like a lot of people will try to relate this film to Walk the Line, but I actually think it has a little bit more in common with Ford v Ferrari, another film by Mangold. And I think the reason for that is that that film was a lot more. It focused a lot more on like the tactile performances. Like it just focuses on the craft and how alluring that is. And that's a little bit of a gamble with this type of film, because when you're talking about musical performances, it has to have good casting and good direction where you're mesmerized by the performances and you can't look away from it. And thankfully, the film does have a very good performance by Timothée Chalamet playing Bob Dylan, and I love how he never plays up Bob Dylan too much. He seems very much like that type of like famous figure where you could slip into caricature with how you try to get like the voice just right. And I think Chalamet just has this very easygoing presence to him that you do need with Bob Dylan, and embodying that, I think it's more important for establishing the character as opposed to just matching the exact mannerisms. Because once I think Chalamet had like the tone down of this character, it's great to see him perform in all these sequences. Like when you first see him start to perform in front of Pete Seeger, played by Edward Norton, with fantastic performance, and he's sitting next to Woody Guthrie in his hospital bed, played by Scoot McNairy, which for a performance here where he doesn't really say much of anything is still pretty damn good. Just watching Chalamet just kind of like mosey into this room and just kind of almost kind of like shyly break out his guitar and then just start, plucking away and singing with like his folk rock to just, mesmerize, Pete and Woody here. It really does like transfix you. And like Mangold has enough faith to let these scenes play out enough where like he's not like constantly dicing it up and editing it. There's a lot of shots that just hold on Chalamet's performance here of just playing and singing and just embodying everything that made so many of those iconic songs so great to hear. And yeah, you do share in that kind of like mesmerization by Pete Seeger when he listens to Bob Dylan for the first time, and he's like, wow, there's really something here, and I need to sign this kid on. And I think like that's probably like the most crucial scene in the film, because unless you believe in that, unless you can see like the same thing that Pete Seeger does, like you're not going to be along with the ride for where Bob Dylan goes here. And another key factor in that too is just Edward Norton's performance, because Norton it is just like it felt like he was born to play this role. And I kind of, this is gonna sound weird, but I kind of got a little bit of a vibe from like is Death to Smoochie kind of like gentle demeanor here. I'm not saying it's exactly reflective. I'm just saying that kind of adds to like making this character be like this believable figure within like the folk rock scene of like the 1960s. And the other thing too is like just like the supporting performances. Like Edward Norton was great here, but also Elle Fanny as Sylvie Russo, who's technically Susie, Bob Dylan's girlfriend. She does a great job playing like this woman struggling to get into Dylan's world. Like she loves him, but it always feels like she can never quite understand his drive. And I think that's almost because like Dylan kind of puts up like these creative barriers around him where he doesn't want to be so easily defined, which which, I mean, you can understand why, because, like, there's scenes where, like, he doesn't want to just play the same songs over and over. He wants to expand, he wants to try out new stuff, he wants to try out electronics in his work, all to, the chagrin of both, like, the people who supported him, and the audience who has come to recognize him. So he just, like, he basically just doesn't want to be a jukebox. He wants to define himself, and he wants to keep growing as an artist, which is an understandable drive for that type of character. But it makes him such a fascinating character, and one that's, like, almost, like, frustrating for Sylvie to understand here. And you would think that, Joan Baez, who's played by Monica Barbaro, and you would think that she would understand a little bit more of him, because she's also she's also a singer, and she plays alongside Bob Dylan. So you think that they'd have, like, a deeper connection. But even then, Joan is still also kind of struggling to understand Bob. And I think it's also part of, like, Bob's frustration with not being so pinned down within his work, where he just wants to, grow, and, within, like, an industry where you kind of have to do that, otherwise you die out. And not to mention, there's everything going on within the 1960s with, like, the political revolution. That was very much, it was fueled by Bob Dylan's music, and it was what fueled Bob Dylan to keep progressing. So it almost feels like Bob Dylan's greater connection here was more within, like, the historical context of the time, and just, looking at what is important and what needs to be stressed upon within just music and art in general, that I think it makes him so much more fascinating here. And like I said, you do get a lot of scenes where it's just him playing, and you do get, like, a lot of other great supporting cast members here. Like, another great one worth mentioning is Boyd Holbrook as Johnny Cash, who it feels like that like Cash and Dylan kind of like vibe in general. Like, they see eye to eye. Like, Johnny Cash can recognize kind of what Bob Dylan's doing here, but also Johnny also kind of represents, like, a little bit of a caution for, the route that he could go down as well. So I love that connection. And again, Holbrook's performance here just kind of, like, moseys onto the scene. He doesn't try to make, like, a big flashy character out of Johnny Cash for the few scenes that he has in this film. He's just kind of, like, there, and he becomes an influence on Dylan, and he just kind of moseys out of the film just as easily as Bob Dylan does. And just like it's great just to, like, watch all these performances, because you really do get transfixed on them. That I think it does warrant the film almost kind of, like, somewhat sidestepping a lot of, like, the political issues of the era. Like, they are brought up, they are addressed with, like, like the civil rights movement, and the problems within, geopolitics at the time, and, like, the anger and the fury in the streets, and, like, the desire for something to change, and something, recognizing that basically the times are changing. I think it helps just to focus on Dylan's perspective of everything that happened within this decade, but then also how it fueled his own creative energy, which led to, like, some relationships disintegrating, but also a lot of other people recognizing his genius for being a little bit more rebellious out of a time where music really did need to be rebellious, and it did need to keep going forward to inspire revolution. So, like, I kind of went back and forth on this film, like, a little bit, because, like, again, I would kind of like to see a little bit more of, like, the era explored, like, just enough. Like, we do get, like, we don't just see, like, Bob Dylan during performances, we also get to see him behind the scenes, and how he interacts with people, and how he's just, even, like, fearful of, like, of people loving him, because he feels like that's gonna pin him down. So we do get to focus on a few different angles of Bob Dylan, but it's mostly on his struggle to, like, be more creative within this industry. And again, a lot of that is very much dependent on the performances, and they work. The musical sequences work, and it's edited perfectly, where it doesn't feel like, we spend too much time on the concerts, or we're cutting away back and forth as though we're trying to, like, cover up everything, like, cover up, like, if there was a bad performance here. There really wasn't. Like, there was rarely a moment where I was just, like, where I wasn't just, in the groove with this and just digging on these characters, embodying these famous actors, and not feel like they're just putting on caricature. It really does feel like they're trying to tap in to that creative energy of the era and everything that defined it. So for keeping the film in that kind of box, like, sure, I would like to see it expanded, but I think that's kind of like the sign of a good film, is that you want to see more of it. Because honestly, I would like to see what happens at the end of this film as Bob Dylan's career keeps going on. Just if only just to see what Timothy would do more with this role and how Mangold would frame the rest of his career. Not saying it would be good. I'm just saying it enticed me. I would like to see a little bit more of that. But for the box that Mangold makes for this film, I think it's very effective. It very much engrossed me, and I loved the musical performances of everyone involved here.